Before we finally win this battle, and I should hasten to say that there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to win. I'm increasingly convinced of this. But before we finally do see victory, we must carry the truth to every man, woman, and child in America. It's literally a question of life and death for all of us. And it's about time the American people began to face up to that fact and to act accordingly. I have no idea of what each of you is going to do in the critical days that lie ahead. It may be much, it may be little, it may be nothing at all. I don't know. Only you can answer that question. But ladies and gentlemen, whatever it is you decide to do for your country, do it soon. Do it now. Every minute that you delay further will add dearly to the price
of ultimate victory.
That was over 50 years ago, Mr. Griffin. Where are we now?
Hearing that phrase after all these years is kind of a shocker because I didn't realize really at the time how accurate it was going to be. But we're in the middle of it now, and so the ultimate victory is still ahead of us.
In your opinion, who are some of the key figures behind this agenda?
In my view, the enemy is in a category called collectivism, and that's the word that applies to all of these things: socialism, communism, fascism, Nazism. All of these things are merely variants of collectivism. That is the philosophy based on the assumption that the group is more important than the individual, and that the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. That's the trick. You're doing this for society.
You are not doing this for yourself. If you are at all like me, your own health, your own risk, is not a big rational driver of all of your actions.
At the beginning of the crisis, I started to study the statistics, and I immediately had the impression that the initial mathematical models and the initial statistics all had indeed dramatically overrated the dangerousness of the virus. That was the moment when I started to think how it was possible that an entire population was in the grip of a narrative which in many respects was blatantly wrong or absurd. After a few months it became clear to me that the only mechanism that could explain what was happening in society was what is usually referred to as mass formation.
Let me hear it if you've had the Pfizer vaccine! Let me hear it from Moderna! AstraZeneca! Let's hear it from the anti-vaxxers!
The process of mass formation is identical to hypnosis. An individual that is in the grip of a process of mass formation typically becomes radically blind for everything that goes against the narratives where the masses or the group believes in. They seem to have lost all interest in the things that were important to them before the mass formation started, which make them radically willing to self-sacrifice, to sacrifice themselves for the collective.
It used to be that an invader could come in with a superior army and people resent it, but they obey because if they don't, they get killed. Now, if they want to conquer people in this environment, they have to do it through the mind. And of course, today, after all the technology that we have, and the control over the communications and the images and the school system and the media, they have absolute control over the funnel of information that comes to the average person. And the average person, if they're not aware that there's a real war going on for their mind, they will be helpless. And they'll be the ones that'll come out and quote all the slogans and say, yes, we have to give up our liberties because it's for the greater good of the greater number.
Obviously, you don't like to tell people what to do, but sometimes for the good of society, that's necessary.
Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
They become radically intolerant for dissonant voices, people who do not go along with the masses are stigmatized, and in the end, the masses typically are inclined to destroy the people who do not go along with them, and they do so as if it is an ethical duty to do so. That's something that was observed in all major examples of mass formation in history. Whether we are talking about the Crusades or the witch hunts or the French Revolution or the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany, in all the major mass formations, we notice the same end point of the process, namely the tendency to commit cruelties, usually to destroy the people who do not go along with the masses, and that it is exactly that what makes the process so dangerous.
This is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
The people who are not getting vaccines, it's time to start shaming them.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
F them, their freedom. I want my freedom to live.
Screw your freedom. You're a schmuck for not wearing a mask.
We have to stop coddling the morons who will not get the shot.
No mask, get out!
Put on your mask or get off.
Put your mask on!
Put your f***ing mask on! Put your mask on!
They have to make people feel content with their slavery or their poverty. And the best way to do that, they have discovered, is to convince them that it's for their own good. And to do that, of course, they have to scare everybody. And as long as people are on the edge of fear, they're willing to give up their liberties and pay lots and lots in taxes under the belief that it's for their good. And then at a higher level, the ideological level, well, helping the poor, helping the downtrodden, that's not so much on fear, but it's based on compassion. And this is where it really works. Because if they convince people that if you act in your own self-interest, if you want to take care of your own family, that somehow you are selfish, and nothing could be further from the truth. Those of us who've discovered this trick long ago, we realize that enlightened self-interest comes into play. If you are acting out of self-interest, you soon discover that the best way to benefit yourself is to help other people. It does come back. The greater good of the greater number comes only when the individual is valued above the group.
Would it be accurate to say that at the root of all of this madness is our intrinsic desire to be connected?
A mass formation typically emerges in a society when very specific conditions are met. First and for all, the most central condition is a major part of the population needs to feel lonely. That's crucial.
Breaking news, stay at home. That is the order tonight.
We must enact an immediate stay-at-home order.
We all need to stay home.
Stay at home.
Stay home.
Stay home.
Stay inside.
Stop socializing.
Go home and stay home.
We're going to go visit Mom. I'm going to bring the home family to see Mom. No.
Once people feel disconnected from their environment, they will typically start to experience a lack of meaning making in life. And then, in a third step, once people feel socially isolated, confronted with lack of meaning making, they will be confronted with anxiety, frustration and aggression. And under these conditions, if a narrative is distributed through the mass media, indicating an object of anxiety and a strategy to deal with this object of anxiety, they suddenly connect to one small object of fear, for instance the coronavirus, and then people don't feel lonely anymore. They feel connected again. But the new kind of social bond is highly problematic, just because the bond is never between individuals. It's always a social bond between individuals and the collective, through which an individual shows that its own individual interests are less important than the collective interests.
A judge has now ended the mask mandate in public schools.
Kids can now take off their face masks in class.
As the human organism wakes up, how do we turn this ship around?
Throughout history, it was always the very small minority. History has always been written by the 1% of the population. 15% of the population create history, and they follow the leadership, the thought leadership of 1%. But that 15% altogether is what changes history. And so all we have to do is reach 15% of the population. I think today, after all this time, we have more than 15%. We just have to get them together so they realize that they're not alone. And that's our task right now.
In the confrontation with emerging totalitarianism, the most important thing is always that the dissonant voices continue to speak out in an as sincere, honest and peaceful way as possible. Non-violent resistance is what always works best. It's a bit cynical, but it is in the end good news. That mass formation and totalitarianism always destroys itself in a relatively short time span. If the people who do not go along with the system continue to speak out, they will succeed.
They're trying to divide us along race and religion and economic status and all these things. No, don't go for that. We've got to realize that we all are humans. We have one thing in common for sure, and that is that we want to be free. That's the melting pot, that's the gyroscope that will bring humanity together. And these powerful forces, I don't care how much money they create out of nothing. I don't care what their occult status is. That'll be washed away by humanity if it just gets united.